Nearly 10 months ago, a full-scale war in Europe is something the Western allies could not have anticipated. But today, the ongoing Russian war in Ukraine is the primary cause of domestic and international woes for European nations. Despite problems at home, the United States and its allies have been backing Ukraine, not just in words, but also in action by supplying ammunition and defense equipment. But now, when the war is in its 10th month, the United States and its European allies are struggling to continue to provide artillery and ammunition to Ukraine, while also scrambling to replenish NATO's stockpiles. Now, Washington is falling short on weapons to provide Kiev and is unwilling to divert weapon exports from delicate regions like Taiwan and South Korea, where China and North Korea are constantly testing its limits. The US is looking at supplying older and cheaper weapons, which would be easier to export. The West is encouraging Ukraine to be more efficient with artillery and not to fire a $150,000 missile at a $20,000 drone. The US military is concerned about the shortage of the 155mm artillery shells and has limited the number of guided rockets, rocket launchers, and howitzers. Analysts say it will take up to 5 years to replenish the stock of the 155mm shells. Now, the US military is concerned about the shortage of these artillery shells and has limited the number of the guided rockets, rocket launchers, and howitzers. NATO has shown interest in investing in old factories in the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Bulgaria. This is to restart the manufacturing of the Soviet caliber 152mm and the 122mm shells for the Ukraine's Soviet-era artillery armory. Although NATO countries have provided Western artillery to Ukraine, such as the standard 155mm shells, many nations cannot sell arms to a country which were produced by another country for war. An example is when the Swiss denied Germany's permission to export Ukraine the ammunition made by Switzerland and sold to Germany. Countries have provided large funds for the war in Ukraine. France has delivered several advanced weapons and funded about $208 million to Ukraine for the purchase of arms. But France flushed out up to 20% of its existing artillery and is now reluctant to provide more. The European Union has approved up to $3.2 billion to member states for providing Ukraine with supplies. But the European Peace Facility Fund is already 90% depleted. NATO countries have delivered weaponry costing up to $40 billion. This is about the size of France's annual defense budget. NATO officials say the amount of artillery being used is staggering as Ukrainians fire up to 7,000 artillery rounds each day, and its ally, the United States, only produces 15,000 rounds each month. But Ukraine still remains desperate for air defense against Russian missiles and Iranian-made drones. Russia is also facing depleting stocks of artillery. Moscow is trying to ramp up the military production as the country fires up to 40,000 rounds per day. It is planning to buy missiles from North Korea and cheaper drones from Iran. Now, for more on this, we are being joined live by Peter Klepp, who is the editor-in-chief of Brussels Report and policy analyst for the EU, Brexit and Eurozone. Thank you for being with us. The United States and European allies are struggling. They are scrambling to continue to provide artillery and ammunition support, while also scrambling to replenish the NATO stockpile. Take us through the latest.
Well, basically the latest is that arms manufacturers in the West, in Europe and the United States, are planning to dramatically scale up production in order to deal with the constraints that you've mentioned. So indeed, the problem is indeed that the war in Ukraine is, of course, requiring from the Ukrainian side a lot of ammunition, weaponry of all sorts. So this is posing a massive challenge, of course, given how intense the conflict is. What we see is that the problem is there for both sides, Russia is also struggling. It's now even dropping rockets just like that, hoping that this will also, inflict damage on Ukraine, also to try to sort of divert and distract the radar systems. So I think it's clear that Russia is also badly struggling, even as you mentioned, has to resort to Iranian drones of very low quality, of North Korean weaponry. So in a way, this is a proxy war going on between the West and Russia. I mean, the West is not in war with Russia. Let's be very clear about that. But it is in a kind of a proxy war in the sense that it is supporting the Ukrainian side. Now, apart from the sort of the logistical limits that you have highlighted in your report, there are also political limits set on weapon support to Ukraine. The West and definitely the United States wants to avoid to tangle up in a direct conflict with Russia. So it therefore has, prevented the Ukrainian army from receiving certain military capabilities, including certain, anti-aircraft systems.
Right. Now, the West is also encouraging Ukraine to be more efficient with the artillery they have. NATO officials say that the amount of artillery being used is up to 7,000 artillery rounds each day. And its ally, the United States, we've just heard, only produces about 15,000 rounds each month.
Yes, exactly. So in order to deal with that, I think the West is more than happy to try to step up the plate and is urging weapon manufacturers to, to step up their production. I would say the real, this is more like a technical challenge. Indeed, it's possible that there may be some delays, that at some point the Ukrainian military may be constrained to a certain degree. But the biggest worry on the Ukrainian side is that the West is not sufficiently quickly in providing tanks to the Ukrainian military. And secondly, is not sufficiently quickly or has been too late, according to the Ukrainians, in providing, defense systems against the missiles being sent from Russia. The concern among Ukrainians is also that they are not allowed to use the weapons on Russian territory. Now, of course, this makes a lot of sense from the Western European and American side, because the last thing we want is that the Ukrainians use their weapons to attack Russian territory. However, the Ukrainian argument is that, look, a lot of these missiles are being sent from Russian territory. So how do you expect us to defend ourselves if we are not allowed to use your weaponry to target those installations? So it's not easy, but I think ultimately, these are discussions that that are taking place, and I think I can see the West moving its limits. Its main concern is to make sure that Ukraine continues to only use its weaponry to defend itself, and is not using its weaponry for some kind of vengeance actions against civilians in Russia, for example, because this may then, drive Russia to declare that the West is in war with Russia, and that's something that Western Europe and the United States want to prevent at all costs.
Absolutely, Peter. Thank you very much for being with us on this broadcast and all your valued insights there.
Thank you very much.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.